back to my studio. I have a great tip for you. If you have a small studio or a big studio, if you're looking for a spot to hang paintings in progress, the back of a door is a great spot. I bought cork in a roll and glued it to this barn door, and it makes a great spot for my demo pieces or works in progress that I want to take a look at. And hidden behind it is my closet. Really handy. Hope you enjoy the video. Hi, welcome back to my studio. Let's get busy on winter whites. First, I'm going to do my grayscale drawing of my picture that you see on the screen right now, which is a rather simple looking scene, and it's very monochromatic, but we're going to make it full of color and much more interesting and still come off as a snow scene. Now I'm doing my quick drawing, tipping in the trees. They're already tipping, but I'm purposely tipping them because it creates just more interest, and especially in a scene where you go back into the distance, it kind of directs the eye and keeps the viewer within the frame. Some straighter trees here. There's some very faint, or I should say muted trees in the background, and a great big evergreen tree here. And there's a couple of people walking in here, which I'm going to capture. Anyhow, they're on a road that was not a path that was plowed, but a road that was plowed. And when you look closely at this photo, it has a wide edge where the snow has been plowed through. So that's pretty deep along the side of this road that they're walking on. So those are just some little notes for myself as a reminder that that has depth and that recedes into the horizon, and so because of perspective, it narrows down. So I'm going to look for my darkest darks right now, which I think would be this trunk. Real rough drawing. And by the way, I usually do these thumbnail drawings about 1.5 inches by 3 inches. You can keep it real small, but for today's purposes, I'm going quite a bit larger, to about 9 by 12. So these branches will come across, all those branches will come in afterwards at the end, but I'm just making notes for myself to decide about my composition and see what's going where. Already I've changed things by tipping these in even more than they are. Here's this evergreen tree that of course has a lot of white on it, and so I don't need to color it in black because there's a lot of white sitting on top of it. But I do want to make a note of the fact that as they recede into the distance, they get paler and paler. And what I want to note in the distance is that it gets very, very faint, and I want to keep this blurry. And we're going to be using sponges today to create that distance in the background. And so I'm just indicating that this is a tint that's very light, and I want to be sure to keep those edges really soft. And I think that's all I need. So that gives me a rough idea of what goes where. I do have a tint in the sky because there is a cloud pattern behind here. So I'm going to just take this light marker that's wearing out and give myself a tint, just as a reminder that that is not bright white. That is a tint. Another thing that I wanted to note is I'm going to do a little drawing down here, actually. Here's a little thumbnail of the same scene. Note that if I divide this up into the rule of thirds, one of these crossbars should be where my focal point is. So in this scene, my focal point is right here. I edited this photo already to make sure that the horizon line is not cutting the painting in half, either vertically or horizontally, and that my focal point, which is the people, are right here in one of those cross hairs. And then that road comes down and around. That road opens up, turns around, trees. All of that are supporting characters that all draw me into that focal point. The road, as well as the trees leaning in, as well as the lightest light on top of that snow in this area, will all lead me to the focal point, which is these people walking. Let's move on to color. So this video is called Winter Whites, and my mission for today is create a snow scene that doesn't have any white in it. That can sound a little crazy, but I'm taking artistic license here, and I'm playing with color. And before I even get started with the lightest value in each color group, I'm setting myself up for a painting that will be more interesting than just a blue and white painting, as it could be looking at this photograph. I have 70% alcohol in a little jar with a paper towel. It's a little tinted because there was something else pink that I used that was in this jar. And it's creating a little tint, which is just fine with me because I'm going with the pinky family tints. I'm working on UArt 400 in a cream color, and that's giving me a tone to begin with. And there I am, set up to get started. I'm going to let this dry. I can always tell if the paper's dry by the touch. If it's cool, it's still wet. If it's warm, then it's dry. I am going to start a little drawing with the light pastel. I'm actually going to use one of the colors I used just to get myself started. So here, again, referring to my drawing and my value study, I'm finding that horizon line, which came above the center and to the right of it. And I'm creating this slanted line, which I really liked a lot. And then it sort of comes up, and this shrub comes around. Whoops, color wheel, it's bouncing around there, out of the way. And the trees, I'm not going to do much detail. I'm just giving myself some direction lines as a reminder. This is just a light drawing, and I'm doing this in a light pastel rather than a piece of charcoal because charcoal tends to get sort of muddy and black, and then I can be fighting against that black, and working on such a light scene like this, I don't want anything to have to fight against. I want to keep this just light and bright. And note also that you never want to have anything end right at the corner because it draws attention to that corner. So I have my pastels that I selected, you can see on the screen, and I have 2 or 3 values of each color family. I have blues, values of the pinks, the peaches, the greens, the yellows, and then I have a bright white for myself, just in case I need to make a touch of it in the lightest area, but I'm going to try to avoid that, but I have it there as reference. I'm going to start with the background, and I want to have some fun with using my sponge, and that's an artist sponge. And funny thing about it is I ordered them on Amazon a couple of years ago, and I went to reorder and realized that I looked in the artist department and I couldn't find them, and then I looked in cosmetics, and sure enough, they are makeup artist sponges. All right, I'm just getting started with that. Let's put a little color over that. I'm looking to keep it tinted and distant. There's a little snow back in there. I'm going to come in with my sky color right now. And I did this beautiful underpainting, and I don't want to cover it all up. So keep that in mind. I often have to remind myself that I did this beautiful underpainting, and it's so much fun playing with pastels that I sometimes get carried away and go too far and lose that pretty background color. So we don't want to do that. We want to try to keep that, incorporate that into our pretty scene here. So I'm going to go for maybe something a little bit warmer. Here's a peachy pink. That's a little bit light. I'll try that. It's a little bit light in value. I'm going to go for something a little, that's a little bit too dark. Make a few marks and then skim back over that. Sometimes just combining two colors does the trick, and you don't always find the color that you want in your box, but you can always glaze one color over the next. I'm going to throw in a little bit of color for the sky, and that's a pale yellow. And while that looks nice and white and bright, in reality, when you see it against white, it's really very yellow, very warm looking. Giving myself some marks that I'll then be smoothing out. And I'm actually going to come in down here and go a little bit lighter with this blue just to add a little interest. All right, let's take a sponge, and I'm going to have a paper towel in my hand so that I can keep it clean. I don't want to mix up colors too much and create mud. So here's a nice soft edge. If you wipe too hard, it'll lift the pastel right off, but I'm going very, very lightly. Barely touching, I'm just skimming the surface. I'm flipping to another side. Often I use my fingers to smear, and that works also, but it presses harder. This is just a very, very light touch, which I like for certain projects. It gives it a wispier look. And I'm going to move into some blue back in here, because whatever's back in there has some snow on it. And I'm going to actually use the corner, the edge of this. It's not a hard edge, but there is a slight rounded corner. And I'm just tapping this, making some marks to indicate those trees in the background that do have snow on them. There are no hardcore rules and regulations for doing this. If something works for you and you see a way of presenting something that's using a texture that's a little different, using your pastel in a different way, please go for it. Do not hesitate and think, oh no, that's against the rules. No, there are no rules. You just have fun. That's the main rule. All right, let's come back in here, and I'm going to skim in. I'm going to start with this snow. I'm going to skim in a little bit of this sort of a blue lavender, and I'm letting some of the warmth of the paper come through, some of that orange that I put in. I'm looking for where else I see this value, and I think I see it down in here, making a few marks. I'm pressing very lightly, or I should say skimming lightly. So here I'm going a little heavier to get rid of those marks. So it's your discretion. Part of mark making, part of pastel painting is very much a part of it is the amount of pressure you use. And that's something that's really important to remember. I'm a calligrapher by trade for 35 or more years. I was a calligrapher and illustrator before I switched to just full-time fine art about 10 or 15 years ago. And it's my pleasure to be able to incorporate some of the things I know and some of the things that I taught myself and the skills that I have in different mediums to be able to apply to painting. And so when I make marks at the end of this process of creating a painting, switching to a greenish tone, a very, very light greenish, it's really a pleasure to use my hand in the same way that I would when I would do calligraphy and use that calligraphic light touch. If you do anything like sewing or crocheting and are used to manipulating your hands in a certain way, try that. Try those movements as you create a pastel painting. You might come up with something different. It could be a staccato move. If you bake cakes and you're used to creating smooth frostings, apply a little bit of that to the way you apply pastels. Bring a little bit of that up here. I also like, after I smooth things over, and usually towards the end of the painting, I like to come back in with some fresh marks like that. It's why I love working on sanded paper. And to create something that's completely smooth, to me, would be a shame, because I love seeing that texture, and that's what that texture is there for. It's there to hang on to your pastels, but it also creates such beautiful textures and transitions from one color to the next. Okay, I'm going to even come back in here and put a couple of brighter marks. If I can get them along those same lines. I'm not worrying about it being exact, but that's nice. I actually kind of rolled my pastel a little. I'll do it again. Just rolling it. So it's creating a slightly thicker trunk or branch. And down here, I'm going to do it again. Just learned something, just taught myself something new. I'm going to kind of roll it. It's giving me a really pretty feeling of fallen snow. That doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel contrived. A lot of the time I feel that when you let things happen naturally and let some happy accidents occur, it ends up looking more realistic than you were if you were to highly render something and fine tune it over and over again. So it's not an easy thing to do, to make some marks and just leave them, but try to. Come back in with a bright, bright pink here and hit this. That was my focal point, and that's what I wanted to really draw attention to. So I'm coming in with some marks there, and it comes around in a little more subtle way, and then can blend back into that sort of greenish. I'll come back in with a little of this sort of a corally, a darker, kind of a grayed down, misty rose-ish color. And why? Because it's just the value that I like. I wasn't really worrying about the color. Values are really what are most important. You can always change the color, but if you get the value right, the painting will read correctly. Let's get something darker around here. Whoops, it's a little bit of a sharp edge. Soften it up, no problem. I am going to come back with something really dark, which I just realized I forgot to pick up for my trees as I was selecting all these colors. So I'm going to come in with a blue-green. I can get away with this because I want this painting to be overall light. So let's see how dark this can go. May not be dark enough. I think I'm going to need, for the drama that I like in a painting, I think I'm going to have to go a little bit darker. But I do like what this is doing. I'm going to come back with that dark. I'm just trying to get the direction of the way those leaves fall correctly so that this reads as an evergreen tree of some kind. And I don't need to put any more information in than that. I'm going to come in with that trunk while I have this. And then there's another one here. And I'm going to come in here. Actually, I'm going to hold off. I need to get color in behind there. I'm going to continue here. It's another evergreen. Comes back into the distance. I tell my students all the time that you have to go through a stage in your painting process where the painting isn't looking exactly like you want it to, and not to let it stop you or get you down. I don't want you to think it's bad. I just want you to tell yourself, it's just not where I want it to be yet. So don't be too hard on yourself. Every artist goes through that ugly stage. That's what this is in now. I'll be taking a break. I'll be right back and we'll continue.